Hey guys, what's up? My name is Gareth from Simple Studios, the only game studio dedicated to your success. And in this video, we're going to be going over the third entry in my super awesome series where I design a game and lead you guys through the process. So as is tradition with all the videos, we're going to start off with the plan and going over what we're going to do today. So we got a little bit of a shorter video because I want to keep these little series videos brief and I want them to be more informative. Because the past couple videos, yeah, I explained a little bit, but I didn't really dive too deep into why I did things or how they work. So that's what I'm going to try and do in this video by having less to cover. So first of all, we are going to add some shaking. Specifically, whenever we get hit, the health bar will shake around. And if you don't remember, here is our game so far. So essentially what happens is enemies will spawn, they know exactly where we are at all times, they will follow us, and when we touch them, our health bar goes down. And then if we kill all the enemies, then we get to pick a reward. Obviously there's nothing yet, but that will be covered in a later part of the series. Now, let's get over to our plan again and quickly go over what else we're going to do. So we already covered that we're going to be doing the shaking, but we're also going to be implementing a dodge. Probably when you press the spacebar, you're going to dodge in the direction that you are facing. And we'll also make a little indicator just to show you which direction you're actually going, so the player can figure out how they're going to dodge. And then right here, I spilled some coffee, so sorry about that. But this stands for invincibility frames, probably 0.25 seconds. And the way that we're going to do this is we're just going to take the player's collider and turn it off. It's pretty simple, but it allows them to move through enemies for a short time, and it also allows and it also makes them invincible to any collision damage, which is what they want out of a dodge. And then finally, we're also going to add another weapon. So right now we just have the Sword of Doom right here. As you saw in the little demo, that just kills all the enemies in range. Like, they have no chance of surviving, but we're going to add a little bow, and it's going to target the closest enemy whenever it can, and then when it finds a suitable target, it will shoot a projectile, and the projectile will get destroyed, and the enemy will take damage. So, with that out of the way, let's get into it. Alright guys, and now we're back with the camera shake and a adjustment to the player controller. So, before we could jump into the super awesome testing, we're going to break down what I did and why in general. So first off, we're going to start with camera shake. This one does pretty much exactly what it says that it does. It will shake the camera whenever the player triggers this method, and it will shake the camera for a duration and at a specific intensity. So, you know, maybe as the player gets lower on health, the intensity increases. Don't know yet, but we have these adjustable variables so that we can have a much more controlled way of controlling the camera shake. And then in the player controller, obviously we have a public reference to the game object of a camera, which is the camera that will have the camera shake. But one key difference with the player is that in the take damage method, we have the camera shake. Now I realized that a little bit of logic was left out of the take damage, and I'm gonna have to add that back, so 1 second. Alright, so it turns out that the player controller actually had all the functionality it needed, I just used the wrong script. So what we actually meant to do was put this in the player health script, not the player controller, because the player health script actually has the take damage method and isn't missing anything. So now after we've sorted that out, let's get into the testing. So before we start, we have to set up a couple things. Mainly, we have to make the main camera a child of the player so that whenever the player moves around, the camera will follow them. And this is very important. Before we do that, we're just going to increase that to 10. We're going to put that back down to 7, actually, I lied. Then we're going to add our camera shake script here. Okay, and then we're going to give the player, we have to find, there it is. Okay. Now let's try this out. So here we are, this is our player. Touched, alright, awesome. So it does work. And now we're going to add a little bit of polish where the lower health the player is, the higher the intensity will be. So, let's get to it. Okay, now we're back. So this wasn't really in the plan, but I felt that, you know, why not, right? We'll take a little bit of extra polish on the game, make it feel a little bit better to play. So essentially what happened is we now have a maximum and minimum of intensity. And essentially what happens is whenever the player takes damage, their health gets reduced, obviously. But then what it does is it takes a look at the percentage of health. Actually, let's go to GIMP and I'll draw this out. Alright, so if max HP is 100, or no, sorry, not minimum, current HP, so just do for current, and if current HP is also 100, the script essentially takes this and divides 100 by 100, and that equals 1. And so because it's 1, the script will say that it is the minimum shake, which is 0.0, whereas the maximum shake is 1.0. So if the player takes a little bit of damage, maybe they have 50 health out of 100, then the script takes 50, divides that by 100 to get 0.5, which means that the script then takes the minimum and maximum shake and finds 50% of that, which in this case is 0.5, and that is our new intensity value. And so essentially the higher health the player is, when they get hit, the camera does not shake a whole lot, but the lower they are, the camera shakes much more. And so ideally this works with the way we implemented it, but let's try it out right now. Alright, awesome. So as you saw there from that little test, it does ramp up with intensity. It needs a little bit of polish here and there, but oh well. We will cover that at some other point. And now that we've got the shake done, let's take a look at our plan and cross this bad boy off. And now let's get into the dodge. So as I said before in the introduction, essentially what we're going to do is whenever the player presses spacebar and they are able to dodge, because it'll have a cooldown, they will move in that direction based on their speed, and then they will become invincible for a very short time. And being invincible just means turning off their collider. So let's get to it. Alrighty, we are back with the new and improved player controller with the dash function. So, the script is quite a lot larger than it was last time, so let's dig into what changed and why it changed this way. So first off, the invincible timer. Whenever the player dashes, during the dash and then for some time after the dash, in this case 1 second, the player will have their collider turned off, effectively making them invincible. Now we're going to change this because 1 second is far too long, and this game is supposed to be a little tough. And then next up, the dash cooldown. After the dash is completed, the dash cooldown goes on cooldown, basically, and it counts down from, in this case, 2 seconds down to 0. During this time, while the dash cooldown is not 0, the player, even if they press space 1,000 times, they will not be able to dash. So we're going to change this to probably 4.5 seconds, because why not? And then here we have a little bit of logic for the direction arrow. Now we'll get into this in the test, but for now, let's dive back into the logic. And then here's our place where we add the arrow sprite. But essentially, where is it? Here we go. So in the update section here, it is constantly checking for if the, if the dash cooldown is 0, and if it is, and the player has pressed space on the same frame, then it will dash in the direction that they're facing. And we'll take a look at the dash first. So here we are in handle dash. Essentially what happens, again, like I said before, if the dash cooldown is 0, and the player presses space, it will move them in the direction they are facing, by 1.5 times speed. And the reason it's 1.5 times speed is because it's like instant movement. It's as if they had been moving in that one direction for 1.5 seconds, and that's the dash. It's a little bit confusing, but hopefully when we do the test, it'll make a little bit more sense when you see it visually. And here's the logic for whenever the player is dashing, their collider is disabled, rendering them invincible. And then this is just some logic for the arrow direction. Basically, if we press W, then the arrow is going to be on top of the player. If we press D, then it's going to be on the right. You get the idea. And then one thing I want to do, probably for a later video, is add in diagonal movement. That's going to be a little bit more tricky, but we'll see. And then right here we have the handle movements. Basically, if you remember from the first episode, if we use W and S, we go up and down. Or no, sorry, if we use A and D for the horizontal, we go left and right. We can also use the arrow keys. We can also use W and S to move up and down, as well as the up and down arrow keys to move up and down. And basically, whenever we press one of these keys, it stores it in the last move position, or sorry, last move direction, and then that direction gets fed to the update arrow method, and then displays the arrow. So that's a whole lot of coding nonsense. And for those of you that are more visual learners, let's dig into how this works right now. Alright guys, so that took a lot of doing, actually, but here is the semi-final result. The direction indicators doesn't show up yet, but we will tackle that at some point, probably in maybe next video, I don't know. But essentially what happens is, this isn't really a dash, it's basically instant movement. So right now the script takes our speed, which is 5, multiplies it by, in this case, 3, has a duration, and essentially what happens is after it multiplies the speed by the dash multiplier, which in this case is 3, giving us 15 movement speed, in the direction that we're moving, it basically figures out this area of 15 units in front of the direction we're moving, and then when we dash, we move at 15 units per second for 0.2 seconds, the dash duration, in this area, and then that gives us our dash. So it's a little confusing, but you can see it here. Maybe it's not super noticeable, but if we change this to 0.5, we can definitely see that we are indeed moving. We zoom whenever we dash, and that's the speed multiplier in action. Now we will have to speed this up a lot. We're going to have to do a lot of polishing, mainly around the invincible timer, making sure that the dash cooldown works properly, and making sure that we, you know, actually have something to look at that isn't just a green square. But anyway, let's tackle our last topic for today, and that is a new weapon. So let me change to a black here. A new weapon, and it is going to target the closest enemy in range. So let's get to it. Alright, so we are back with the first iteration of the crossbow, and there's a couple things to break down here, so let's get into it. First up, we'll start with the crossbow, because that is the most important part. It has a range, a cooldown time, and a projectile prefab, which is this thing. But digging into range first, basically the crossbow draws a large circle around itself, which is attached to the player, so whenever the player moves, this area of the crossbow also moves. Then, when cooldown hits 0, it figures out the closest enemy, or sorry, tagged enemy in the range, and as we can see here, we have to go to the prefabs. Take a look at the enemy. They now have an enemy tag, and it will take the closest enemy tag. If they are multiple enemies that are the closest, then it will just pick one at random. But when it finds a target, it will shoot a projectile at them, and the projectile travels at a certain speed and deals a certain damage. And it gets its target from the initialized enemy on the crossbow, and then when it actually hits the target, collides with them, it triggers the hit target method, which deals damage to them. And as you can see here, we have this this take damage method referenced, and for some reason the enemy thing is not pulled up, but whatever. I think we know what the take damage method does, so we'll run the game and see if this actually works. Fingers crossed. Oh, of course. That's right, we deleted the waves, so let's actually add a wave back, and yeah. Okay. Well, that's a little weird. So, let's fix those. Let's fix those issues. So for some reason, the projectile doesn't seem to get destroyed, which it should, because in here it says that it's supposed to destroy the game object. Well, let's try a simple fix first. We'll dive into the prefab. Maybe what's happening is because we have a rigid body, it is hitting the enemy itself instead of the collider. So let's just make the collider larger. Okay, let's try this again. Let's take a look. No. Okay. Huh. Back to the drawing board. Alright, so really quick, here's what happened. In the previous method, we were using on-trigger enter 2D, which, if you are not familiar, means that it can only interact with box colliders or any colliders if it is set to trigger. So once Unity decides to load here, I will show you what I mean. Okay, so on the enemy, we have the box collider, and you can see this little thing here called isTrigger. If this is true, then stuff like on trigger enter 2D will actually collide with that box collider and, in this case, deal damage and destroy the projectile. However, because the enemy was not set to isTrigger, this didn't work. And we saw that in the tests, and now that we've changed it to on collision enter 2D, this means that when it actually hits the box collider, not just the trigger, it will do what it needs to. So we'll flick our enemy back to not isTrigger, and we'll see if this now works. And fingers crossed it does, because I think we're also running out of time. Okay, there we go. So we can see that the projectile has hit the enemy, and we'll double check if it has taken damage, and yes it has. Absolutely wonderful. Were we doing anything else? I don't know. No, we weren't. Okay, awesome. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I hope you guys enjoyed it, and hopefully I'll see you guys in the next one.